Hey everybody, welcome to the event that's called Stop the Crisis. My name is Cam Khan. I am one of the youth directors at the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community in Glen Ellen. And I welcome you this evening. I sincerely appreciate that you've taken time out of your schedule to come here and listen to us. We've been doing this campaign called Stop the Crisis for roughly over a year, all across North America and Europe. We've held roughly over 40 events since January of this year across America, from East Coast to West Coast. Our focus has been colleges, universities, libraries, and any other mediums where there's education that's being taught. We've been in UCLA, Princeton, Harvard, and many other locations. We're here to tackle some of these hard issues that are related to ISIS, what they're doing, the misconceptions they're creating about Islam that most of you guys hear about in CNN and various other news channels. What we're going to talk about today is that what the real Islamic teachings are and how they're being misconstrued by the public, the followers of this ISIS group. We're also going to tell you how we believe the best way is to tackle the situation, which is by promoting more and more education to the youth, and as well as welcome Imam Azam Akram to talk to us and educate us a little bit about Stop the Crisis.
July 27, 2008, an enraged gunman walked the halls of Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church before taking a 12-gauge shotgun out of his guitar case and opening fire on an audience of 200 people watching a children's play. 58-year-old Jim Atkinson said he was motivated by hatred of liberals, Democrats, and homosexuals. He was an extremist whose ideology of hate led to this act of terror. On April 19, 1995, terror and panic gripped the nation when Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols carried out a carefully crafted bombing of the Alfred P. Murray Federal Office Building in Oklahoma City.
The explosion shook central Oklahoma, killed nearly 170 people and injured more than 400 others. And it forever altered our sense of security and innocence.
They detonated a truck carrying more than 4,800 pounds of explosives. The explosion killed 169 people, injuring 700 more, and either destroying or damaging 324 buildings within a 16-block radius. Victims, including 3 pregnant women, ranged in age, which led to this vicious act of terrorism, which forever lives in infamy. A quiet lunch at a Full Moon's cafeteria in Texas came to an abrupt end on October 16, 1991. 35-year-old George Jojo Hennard drove his pickup truck through the cafe's front window. Exiting the truck, Hennard then opened fire, unleashing a rampage that killed 23 people and injured 20 more. This former military man was known not only for being an unhappy loner, but also for his intense hatred towards women, and even during the attack screamed, "All women of Killeen resulted in fighters." On January 24, 1975, Puerto Rican extremist nationalist group known as the AMYA bombed the Francis Tavern in New York City, killing 4 people and injuring more than 50 others. From 1974 to 1983, the AMYA was responsible for more than 120 bomb attacks on the United States. In reality, we've seen extremism many times in our history, which carries forward till today in what feels like an unending stream of shootings at schools and public facilities. Extremism is manifested in every generation in different ways and under various circumstances. Ultimately, it is not a matter of religion at all. Religion has nothing to do with it. Every time, it has been due to the actions of misguided individuals who are just frustrated with the world as they understood it.
Greet you with the Islamic greetings of Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and blessings of God be upon all of us. One thing I'd like to clear off right off the bat is that when I say Allah, That is the Arabic or Islamic term for God. Whether you believe in Jehovah, Yahweh, whatever. In Islam, there's only one God, and that is the God of all mankind. With that, that was a really hard video. Every time we have to play that, just to give an understanding of what this whole event entails. These tragic events that happened in the past, just recently in Paris, in Beirut, in Nigeria, all these are attacks against humanity. I'm a Muslim up here, and I'm not condemning these attacks as a Muslim. I'm condemning these attacks as a decent human being. And at the end of the day, when we divide ourselves into different camps, whether it's amongst Muslims, Shias, Sunnis, Wahhabis, Deobandis, this is exactly what these radical lunatics want. The campaign is called StopTheCrISIS. It's a sort of a play on the word ISIS. But for us, we don't like to use that term. We like to use the term Daesh. And for you folks out there who've never heard this term, it's spelled Daesh. What does this term mean? See, ISIS wants the claim that we are an Islamic state. And by us using that word again and again, or that acronym again and again, it sort of gives them that legitimacy. In the Arab world, where the majority of the victims of this lunatic group are Muslims themselves, they use this word. And in Arabic, Daesh means literally to stomp on something, like a dirty bug that they are. So now, what is ISIS interested, or what is Daesh? See, I just made that mistake again because I'm just programmed to say it. What is Daesh interested in? The only thing they're interested in is power. They're a power-hungry, monstrous group. And that's the way they want to gain legitimacy, is calling themselves Islamic, or dealing with any sort of an Islamic connotation, and calling themselves a legitimate Muslim group. But they are not. That's the key word here. Terrorists are not Muslim or Islamic. See, there's two things you have to identify here. Terror is a tactic that is used. Terror is a tactic. Islam is an ideology. You have to separate the two to understand this. And once you separate the two, you delegitimize them in a way. Let's define what a terrorist, how the terrorist tactic operates. I'm just going to throw it out there. And I'm sure you all know, how do terrorists operate? Instill fear, instill terror, instill prey on the weaknesses and the prejudices of people. And that's exactly what they're good at. Now, T.S. Eliot, the famous American poet, said it best, that to lose beauty through terror, terror through inquisition. And that's what we are all here today, is with our inquisitive minds, the questions that we'll ask, the dialogues that we'll have, hopefully we'll come to a better understanding. Because here's the key. Ignorance leads to misunderstanding, and misunderstanding leads to fear, and then fear leads to hatred. Hatred leads to anger, and anger leads to violence. And this cycle is what this terrorist organization preys on. Whenever a crime is committed, for example, here in America, and there's some sort of a gun involved, we don't understand what's going on. So what do? We blame, I guess, gun laws, and it becomes a whole gun law issue. When you really have to look at the fact that there are lunatics everywhere, and that was the method that they had used to carry out their terrorism, if you want to call it. But if there's a bombing or a terrorist who claims to be a Muslim, who does something in the name of Islam, out of his own or her own ignorance, all of a sudden they become a Muslim terrorist. So it's an understanding that we need to gauge. And what is the best way to understand Islam? The best way to understand is read, education, and to speak to a Muslim. And I'll admit, I'll be the first to admit, Muslims have not been doing as much outreach as we should. As an imam, I'll admit that. We're lacking in that regard. But that's what we're trying to do here by coming to these forums and hosting these forums, so we may be able to get through the audiences that we deal with. Now, to better understand terrorism, we have to look at radicalization, right? We have to look at where it all started. How many of you were born prior to the 1980s? Right? The 1970s? Was this a big issue back then? 80s, was this a big issue back then? All of a sudden, in some parts of the world, it starts to become a big issue. What we have to realize is that this type of terrorism is a very recent phenomenon. And to better understand this, you have to understand in Islam, or in the region, Islamic world, where did this come out of? Well, you see, majority of the Muslim world were colonies of empires, whether it's the British Empire, the French Empire, the Spanish Empire, you name them. And within these empires, there were dissenters who didn't want to be colonized. So what did they do? They would use their religion, because that's the only thing that they knew, to connect the communities and then insert their own radical ideologies to rise up against the so-called authorities or the oppressors. Now, let me give you a very particular example. In the 1920s, there's a gentleman by the name of Abul Atta Maududi, an Indian. At that time, there was no India in Pakistan. It was just known as the British Raj. Here's a journalist with no religious qualifications whatsoever, starts using Islamic texts to warrant warfare against the authorities. Starts writing. He was a very prolific writer, and he gained a lot of following and a lot of masses. He introduced concepts that were foreign to Islam before him. And then so far his writings had spread towards the Middle East. And then you have a gentleman by the name of Sayyid al-Qutb, who picked up these writings and was impressed by them. Sayyid al-Qutb, by the way, was sponsored to come here to the United States in the 1940s or 50s to study here in the universities of America. When he went back home, he developed this radical ideology and started the group. How many of you have heard of the Muslim Brotherhood? All right? Started the ideologies that laid the foundation for the Muslim Brotherhood. In turn, he radicalized a gentleman by the name of al-Zarqawi. Anybody have heard of al-Zarqawi? You must have. Who in turn radicalized a gentleman by the name of Osama bin Laden. Right? And what does Osama bin Laden do? And here's the other misnomer about these unfortunate souls, is that they are not poor. They are not uneducated. They come from very decent families. They're educated. They're lawyers, they're engineers, they're doctors, they hold degrees. They've gone to good schools. And they come from good families. And here you have the United States, who needed a bunch of people to fight their war for them in Afghanistan against the Russians. How convenient to get mercenaries to do your dirty job for you. Now, he funded, and he had this connection that these are our Muslim brothers all over the world that are being persecuted. Same thing that Abu Atta used, Maududi used, to radicalize the Muslims at that time, to fight against their oppressors, the so-called oppressors. And he did the same thing. At that time, he was an ally, right? And then he turned rogue. So, what is it, and how is it that this is just a recent phenomenon? I'll just give you an example of how these radicals come about. There's an earthquake that happens in Pakistan in 2005. 7.6 on the Richter scale, huge magnitude, utter destruction. Foreign aid does come into the country, but where it is needed most is in the hills of Kashmir and Pakistan, where no vehicle could travel. No helicopter could land their planes on these hills. But who were the saviors at that time? It was the Taliban, because they were on foot. They had their donkeys and their mules. They went, and they were the heroes at that time. 5,000 children that were orphaned were taken under their care and put into their system of madrasas. Where do you think that these this radical mentality is developed? It's developed in those madrasas, which are funded by who? Funded by foreign aid. So you see, the thing is, each and every American here, American citizen, since this war on terror has begun, out of your own pockets and our own pockets, has spent over $16,000 US each to fund this war on terror. Has it made the world a more peaceful place? Has it made the world a more safe place? This is a very important question that we must ask ourselves. And where does Islam fit in? Nowhere. These are political ideologies that have crept into the faith has been hijacked and used for their political agendas. To understand Islam, here's another thing I wanted to show. There's a video. Another misnomer is that converts to Islam. Number one, I'm not here to prophesize Islam or to promote Islam in any way, because this is not the time and this is not the place. What I'm trying to do is trying to bring about a healthy dialogue and discussion, and also show that this accusation, well, a lot of converts accept Islam on, false pretenses. And we, as the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, what right do I have here to stand to you and speak on Islam? We are the largest organized Muslim organization.
Some people, they go on a spiritual journey. There's no doubt about that. People travel the world far and wide to find themselves. We're always looking for themselves, searching for themselves. I have to admit that I was in the same category as well. There was something that I was looking for, but I didn't exactly know what it was. When I had some friends who introduced me to Islam, and so when I was out in Alberta and I had accepted Islam, the first thing that I thought was I had found what I had been looking for. The second thing I thought is, what's my family going to think about this? It was strange for my family. They didn't have a Muslim friend, Muslim co-worker. We didn't have Muslim neighbors. I was the first Muslim my family knew. But this was a good impression for them because they knew what I was like before Islam.
Caliphate differs in different branches of Islam, from Sunnism to 5er Shia to 7er Shiite to 12er Shiite.
Absolutely.
It's very complex and impossible to summarize in a few sentences.
And you're summarizing.
But basically, a successor of the Prophet Muhammad, who would lead the Ummah and be God's representative on earth, and successor of the Prophet Muhammad.
The Ahmadiyya Muslim Community was established by Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad in Qadian, a small and remote village in India. He claimed to be the expected reformer of the latter days, the one awaited by all the major world religions. Founded in 1889, the community has continued to spread throughout the world, flourishing under Caliphate, the system of spiritual leadership established after the demise of the holy founder. The current successor of the movement, Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, continues the work of the holy founder to revive the spiritual and moral state of mankind. The movement embodies the benevolent message of Islam in its pristine purity. A movement that preaches peace, universal brotherhood, and the submission to the will of God. Ahmadiyya Muslims have earned the distinction and reputation of being a law-abiding and peaceful community. Within a century, the community has reached all the corners of the earth and has been recognized and praised by the global community.
In the past 100 years, you have given so much to the society in the United Kingdom and to societies everywhere globally. You are among those who give.
And wherever Ahmadis live in the world, you are renowned for enthusiastically participating in the larger community and peacefully living alongside people of all faiths, languages, and cultures. All Calgarians, Albertans, and Canadians can see in this mosque the true and benevolent face of Islam and those who worship in its name.
Teachings of Islam and the message of peace and tolerance through a 24-hour satellite television channel, MTA, and the internet. As one of the fundamental principles of Islam is to serve the creation of God, one's fellow human beings. It has been at the forefront of worldwide disaster relief through an independent charitable organization, Humanity First.
If you believe in Creator, you must also believe in His creation. If you love the artist, you must also love his art.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for hosting this event. Really informative. My question is, why do you think the Islamic State has been effective in recruiting young people to that cause, men and women, really throughout the world? What is it that is drawing people to that cause?
So there are many factors. It's pretty hard. I'm so excited I can't sit down. Okay, so there are many factors to this problem. Number one, when you poll these glorified gangsters, what you find is that money is not the issue. Class is not the issue. You find that they have an affinity towards their fellow community members, if you will.
I was just wondering, what do you think about, since the for attacks in France especially, there's been a lot of talk about what we should do, about the immigrants
Refugees.
Refugees from Syria and other parts of the Middle East, and because there's a lot of fear that and I think justified fear that even though most of them are peaceful and trying to escape persecution, that their terrorists are going to try to sneak in. So what do you think about how we should handle those immigrants and handle that, allow them in while handling that looming danger that of terrorists trying to sneak in?
Very good question. How do we handle the refugees that are stuck in no man's land and have, if they go back, ultimate doom awaits them and they go forward? You have to understand, to walk thousands of miles on foot with children, old age, people are delivering on the side of the roads, people are, living in conditions that are horrific. It's nothing of their own doing. That's the first thing we have to understand. What did these people do to deserve that type of treatment? The second thing is we have to understand is that there is a way, there could be a proper way to vet these people that are coming into the country. Vet them properly, make sure that we're not getting the bad apples coming in. And, there are a lot of women and children in these groups. The other thing I'd like to note is that over something.
Hello, everybody. My name is David, and I'm from South Africa. I want to say that firstly, you're doing a great job, and thank you for this. It was very, mind-opening. In my country, in 1976, we went through something called apartheid. I don't know if most of you have heard it. Yeah, we went through that, and I was not born yet. I was just born later in the 80s. But I watched documentaries. I did research, by myself. And then I noticed that it was blacks fighting against whites because of the whole, they wanted to change the education system in South Africa. And then so as I grew up, obviously raised by my parents. What they did not teach me is that I should dwell too much on what happened in the past, although lives were lost because of people who were fighting for what is right. So when I heard about everything that happened in France, people were all over the social media. You saw how we changed our display pictures to the flag of France. So a lot of people from Africa and South Africa were saying that, why are Africans supporting France? Why should we pray for them if they also did something to our country back in the day? You understand what I'm saying? And I tried to educate more of them by saying that, personally, I believe that hate cannot drive out hate. Just like darkness cannot drive out darkness. But if you want to drive out darkness, you need light. So if you want to drive out hate, you need love to drive out hate. So in saying that, I also try to tell most people that nobody is born knowing how to hate. Nobody is born a terrorist, and no one is born racist. These are things that people teach people. These are things that parents teach their children. So in the same way, if you can teach someone how to hate, if you can teach someone how to be a terrorist, why can't you teach them how to be peaceful and loving? Because those are things you can teach. So I am happy to see all the young people in here today, and sometimes when you speak the way I speak, people say that you forgot about what people did to you. No, I did not forget that. But remember, when you are arrested and then you are released from prison 5 years later, you may be released from prison, but when you are still bitter, you are physically free, but you're still mentally imprisoned, and that is the most dangerous thing ever. Because a lot of people today, they're physically free, but they're mentally imprisoned, which is the problems that we still face today. So I try to tell most young people in almost every country in saying that this is what our forefathers did, this is what our predecessors did. Your country did something bad to my country, but we cannot carry on like that because we are fresh new minds. Let us find a peaceful way of moving forward. Thanks.
21-year veteran of the Bates County Sheriff's Office. I'm a sergeant on patrol. Right now in the media, we're taking a lot of hits with different things with law enforcement. Bad apples have tarnished my profession. And I was wondering, with everything going on in Paris and Daesh, I don't want to use this ISIS thing ever again, I like that better. Daesh, how has the media affected you in the Muslim community? And what do you think Daesh is benefiting from? How much are they benefiting from the media coverage from this? Just to give you an example, this whole Fox Lake police officer deal, every day we get a different story about him, so it stays in the media and they're continuing to sell newspapers. Is that also happening in the Muslim community?
Thank you. I felt like I planted that question for you, but I didn't, just to be sure. So how does the media? I'll give you an example. In New York, I had an event in February. We invited everybody. We rented on a nice hall. We wanted people to come. A lot of people showed up. And when I asked the media what's going on, he said, well, you're not an anomaly. You're not an anomaly. Spreading peace and tolerance doesn't sell. So, the same thing. I mean, when we look at video games, how many of us played video games? Call of Duty 4? Anyone?
Black Ops 3.
Black Ops 3, there you go. So, that's the games I play. I mean, if somebody was to sell me on a game that was to spread flowers, and every time I spread a flower or a hug, I get a point, I would never buy that game. We've become so desensitized to violence. And now you have YouTube, you have WikiLeaks, you have Live Leaks, you have World Star Hip Hop. Was it? Hip Hop World Star? World Star, right? So you get to see the world unfold in front of your eyes. The media has become so desensitized. And the other thing is that if one rotten apple blows up something, they become an anomaly. And that news will stay in, and no matter how much we're trying to speak out against it, you won't see us getting a lot of coverage. But that's okay. We'll keep moving on. And that's my advice to you, man. You're going to get a lot of flack for, another thing that some idiot did that wore the badge, but that doesn't represent who you are, You just got to keep pulling through. We've been doing this since September 11th, 2001, and before that. How many of you know the AMYA Muslim is one of the only Muslim communities that collected over 100,000 pints of blood in memory of the victims that were lost in 9/11. We have a campaign called Muslims for Life, the sanctity of life. We have a campaign called, being patriotic to your country is part of faith. We tell people the Constitution is in line with the Islamic laws that we practice. Freedom of religion is one of the most paramount things, and we love this country because it allows us to wear a cap, to wear whatever we want to wear without being harassed by you, Sheriff, of course. You know what I'm saying? So I just like to give you an example. So after this Paris attacks happens, right? Somebody comes to our mosque with a really high-powered rifle and starts shooting our mosque up here in Connecticut. And I mean, literally, the walls were pierced with these bullet holes and went through the walls. Luckily, thankfully, nobody was there. But in reply, we believe, humanity is great. And here's a letter of condolences that we received afterwards. That, dear members of Masjid Baitul Aman, which is the name of the mosque, thankfully, no innocent person was injured or killed in the cowardly attack on your place of worship. You are our neighbors, our colleagues, our friends. We stand with you at this stressful time. Terrorists use violence and fear as their currency. An attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. But we, Muslim, Christian, Sikh, Hindu, Jewish, or atheist, will never give in to the cowards with no respect for basic human rights. Terrorism has no religion, and it certainly has no place in our state. Tell me how we can best support your safety and right to live peacefully. Worship without fear and be free of harassment or harm. I will stand with you in any way that I can. Sincerely. And this is the faith that is being restored in humanity. That despite what's going on in the world, you get people like that writing letters. And how many of them are there? So there's a lot of goodness in the world. When we see these things, we think the world is coming to an end. It's not. Let's restore faith in humanity. And that's what we're trying to do.
I think, officer, if you beat one person in the street, it will come 10 times in the press and media. But if you help 100 people, nobody knows what you have done. So same thing is done by press and media with this act of terrorist activities, which are these handful of people, what they are doing, it will repeat it over and over and over. This kind of meeting, maybe once in a while, it will come, but not as a ratio about those things which is coming in the press and media.
Thank you very much. If you have, is Jay in the house? Jay? That's you. Are you from?
Northwestern.
Northwestern. Good. I want to talk to you afterward. Sorry, you had a question in the back.
So during this presidential election, who do you feel out of all the candidates resonates and understands Islamic faith and like what's going on in Syria and everything else like that? Like, who do you feel can understand and provide knowledge for everybody else the best? Like, who do you feel is trying to raise awareness, I guess, the most?
We can talk offline.
I'll answer. Bernie Sanders.
I'm a Canadian citizen, by the way, so I really have nothing to do with U.S. politics. You see, in Canada, we have a couple of parties, and we got a really great guy in Justin Trudeau, who's a hottie, by the way, and a really great guy, and young and energetic. So I can speak for him. He's a very tolerant, very interesting person and involved with the community. What America needs is sort of a leader who understands the world in that sense. Because the world is changing and the perspectives of the world have to change. You can't have people that rush into things without taking consideration. So in Islam, the only qualification of having a righteous or a good leader is that, number one, he acts or she acts upon equity and justice, and number 2, he or she consults with the citizens of the country. So anybody who fulfills these 2 requirements, and then you can propose any name that you want. But as long as they fulfill these 2 requirements, that they will act responsibly, and they will be accountable for their actions, and they will deal with justice and equity. And number 2, they would consult with the citizens of this nation. That would be a great leader for this country.
And after listening to the debates, we have to decide ourselves which one is a good candidate for that.
If I could just add something, we are the Ahmadiyya Muslim Youth Association, which is an auxiliary of Ahmadiyya Muslim Community. And what we're taught by the president of our association is to serve for the sake of my faith, country, and nation. So no matter what the country elects or who they elect, whether it's a man or a woman, our responsibility is to serve and follow them and make sure that we stand with our nation. A question from the lady in the back, and I'll come back to you in just a second. Gotcha. Sorry.
So, what is the response to someone who says that the idea that ISIS is spreading, how one banner, all nations under one banner, of this caliphate, which had taken historical precedence following the death of the Prophet, right? Historically, what do you say is the response to someone who says that what they're doing is something fundamentally Islamic? Like I said, from historical precedence.
Where's the historical precedence in this so-called caliphate? There is none. The historical precedence in that caliphate is that caliph was appointed by the Prophet, peace be upon him. He lived with the Prophet. He understood the ways of the Prophet. And he was the most trusted companion of the Prophet. Okay? These elections were conducted through the process known as consultation, shura. This caliphate was just one that was just propped up and stood up and says, look, I'm the new so-called caliph. That has never happened in the history of Islam. So there's no historical precedence from the very beginning for that. Right. So, and the basic fact of the matter is that caliphate or khilafat needs to be preceded by a prophet or prophethood. And the fundamental difference between the Ahmadiyya Muslim community and the other Muslim communities, we do believe that Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian, the founder of our community, was a prophet of God. Okay? So that's the other qualification. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Do you have any questions from online?
Yeah, there's a couple of questions coming in from online. One of the questions...
There you go. Hold on.
All right.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a couple of questions from our Periscope.
So, one of the questions that's been being asked repeatedly recently on Periscope is, how do we feel as Muslims that we are being represented by people like ISIS in the media and things like that?
So, number one, we don't validate that statement. We're not. We speak vehemently against that. We have mentioned Daesh has nothing to do with Islam. They do not represent Islam in any way, shape, or form. We've gone through this whole thing from the very beginning of understanding how Islam is used as a political tool, where terrorism is a tactic and they try to employ Islam as its ideology. It can't be done that way. So I think it's 7 o'clock.
We'll take one more question if there is any. Any questions? Do we have any questions online? Any other questions online?
There's a lot.
We'll take one question online and we'll take a comment from here.
I just want to applaud you for this. I think this is the way that you seek peace and you
seek justice is through education and is through understanding. And I also want to say that I think the youth are our future, and I am so happy to see so many youth in this room. I mean, this is where it's at. So the youth education, so important. Thank you.
We'll take one final questions from Periscope, but before I forget, there's some free literature on a table outside this lecture. Also, please feel free to grab that on your way out. We have some refreshments as well if you'd like to stick around and chat with any one of the imams that are here. And then finally, there's a registration sheet outside. If you could fill that out, we'll send you a survey. We want your feedback. We are planning to do hopefully more lectures either here or other locations. If you'd like to attend, if you have some ideas on topics of interest, we want to hear from you. One final question from Periscope.
Somebody on Periscope was asking a while ago, what does the Quran say about apostasy, about leaving Islam?
So Islam is very clear on apostasy, and I'll let Imam Shamshad Sabri elaborate on this. But it's simply that there is no punishment in this world for anybody. That is the prerogative of God Himself. Allah takes responsibility for that. And as a human being, the Quran says that those who leave their faith, return back to their faith, leave their faith again, return back, and then leave again, their matter is with Allah. So imagine the first person, he comes back, and then he leaves a third time. He should have been killed in the first instance if there was any punishment, but there was none. I'll let Imam Sahib elaborate.
Islam clearly says there is no compulsion in the matter of faith. That is clear-cut teaching. And the first pillar of Islam also provides the freedom of faith. As it is said already, that Islam gave complete freedom choice, that whether you believe, you don't believe. Punishment in the Quran, and Prophet Muhammad, peace on him, did not kill anybody because he denounced the religion of Islam. So that we stand for that religion, for that teaching, that freedom of faith, freedom of religion, and freedom to exercise your faith as you like. In the time of Holy Prophet of Islam in Medina, it was practiced, and Ahmadiyya Muslim Community stand for that.
Thank you very much, Imam Shamshad Nasir. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our session, our lecture for this evening. Once again, on behalf of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community and Ahmadiyya Muslim Youth Association, I thank you very much for taking time to come out and listening to us tonight.